The average age a boy first encounters pornography is 10 years old. Pornography wants to capture our sons' souls and enslave them. But you can lead your son to live free of pornography, and we want to help you do that. This is the Freedom to Love podcast. Welcome back to the Freedom to Love podcast. Thanks for joining us for this episode. Do you ever wish that you had an experienced parent who could be there just to tell you all the things that you should know about raising happy, healthy, and holy kids? If you have, you are in luck. In today's podcast, I'm going to introduce you to Linda Kracht. She is the founder of Fortifying Families of Faith and the author of Daughters and Sons Forever, Parenting Against the Tide. In her book, she covers pretty much everything from the A to the Z of raising happy, healthy, and holy kids. And in this episode, Linda and I introduce you to the sacred duties of parents and discuss your God-given role as primary educators of your kids. But before we get into the episode, let me introduce myself. My name is Jeremy Rohr. I am the founder of Freedom to Love. We are a ministry devoted to helping parents raise sons who can live free of pornography. And we provide resources like this podcast for parents to give you encouragement and practical tips to raise your sons to live free of pornography and sexual sin. You can learn more about us at our website, freedomtolove.org. There you can find helpful resources and stay up to date on our latest events. And of course, if there's ever anything we can do to help you or someone you care about, we are here to serve you. Please continue to pray for the young men participating in the chastity course I'm leading at St. Michael Catholic Church in St. Michael. We're about halfway through an 8-week course, and I think we ended up with about 30 high school boys participating, which is just fantastic. And the response has been really good so far, but I would appreciate your prayers just for protection and that they have the courage to stay strong on the journey. And with that, let's get on to today's podcast with Linda Kracht, author of Daughters and Sons Forever, Parenting Against the Tide. Enjoy this week's podcast. I'm excited to welcome this episode, Linda Kracht. She is the founder and creator of Fortifying Families of Faith, and she has created just a number of great resources. And I'm excited today to have a conversation out of some of the material she has in a resource called Daughters and Sons Forever, Parenting Against the Tide. Linda, thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you making time.
Thank you, Jeremy. It's great to be with you.
Yeah. Well, Linda, why don't you tell the audience a little bit about yourself, about Fortifying Families of Faith, and how you started doing this?
It's kind of a long story, so I think I'll cut it short.
Okay.
Fortifying Families of Faith has been around since about 2008. I had been chairman of the board of directors for an organization called Couple to Couple League. We taught natural family planning to couples for about 10 years before that. And then Dave and I were longtime teaching couples. And I had this idea about the families because it seemed like it would pair well with natural family planning. I presented it to the board of directors and I was the chairman, but I said to them, this is my idea and I'd love us to pursue this through this organization that I was the chairman of. And they weren't interested. They said, why don't you think about doing it or launching it yourself? Because they just didn't want to take the risk or go that direction. So I said, well, that's what I think I'm going to do because I really just had a burning desire to do this after having we're raising our children, of course, and putting on some seminars at the high school where they were going. So that's what I did. I started writing this book. And then since then I've written, I think 7 other books. And then I have a book for college students and I've got a breastfeeding book. And so I kind of cover the whole branch from, having babies to college age. So.
Yeah, that's wonderful. So you have quite a bit of experience in this. And what I love about the book, again, Daughters and Sons Forever, Parenting Against the Tide, is that book primarily for parents then, or who is that for, and how would it be used? Because it has both, looks like a text as well as a workbook with it. So
Right.
talk a little bit
Right.
about that.
So when I'm talking about parents of adolescents, I'm generally talking about if their kids are between like 10 and 18. So that's a pretty wide range, but you can tailor it as a parent to do it differently. For the older kids, I would read a chapter with that 16, 15-year-old. And then the workbook has pages where the parents fill out their answers and then the adolescent fills out their answer. When it's younger children, I would pick more what I'm hearing them talk about and maybe just dabble in a chapter or two. I wouldn't do the whole book necessarily because I think it would be too much for the younger age, but at least it would start wanting to know what they're thinking about, what they're hearing about, right? Because kids are hearing a lot of stuff, but they're not necessarily saying to mom, I don't understand this transgender stuff, but they're really pushing it in school. So what do you think about it? Most kids aren't really, they're going to be kind of shy about bringing that up. First of all, because maybe they don't understand it. They don't want to admit that they've heard it and they don't like the sounds of something. And so they're maybe afraid. Maybe there's lots of different emotions involved. So this lets parents get ahead of that by bringing up the topics themselves if they think that it should be addressed at whatever age. But for sure, by the time a person is like 13, 14, 15, I think the whole book is great.
It's a very thorough book. When we talked, I think it was at the Catholic Homeschooling Conference last spring, you were telling me that your background prior to Couple League is you were an engineer. Is that right?
Yeah. Yeah, I can't.
And I'm like, wow, you are incredibly thorough in the materials. But I think that's one of the strengths of it is that it just gives a parent so much good information that I can't recommend it highly enough. So, but what I'd love to do in this first episode together is you draw attention early in the book to what you call the sacred duties of parents.
Mm.
And in this season 2 of the Freedom to Love podcast, what we're doing is really focusing on the parents and working to talk to them about things that they can do to help raise their sons to live free of pornography. And I love that concept that being a parent brings with it sacred duties. So what I want to do is go through a few of those, but before we get into it, what do you mean when you reference and write about sacred duties?
Well, I think most parents naturally know that they have a natural duty on a natural level, if you want to call it that word, to feed, clothe, and house their children, right? I mean, if you're not doing that, you're just shouldn't be a parent. But those are bare minimums, right? Because a child can be full and a child can have nice clothes and they can go to a nice school and their hearts can be empty because they're still trying to discover who they are, what is their purpose in life, who loves them, who do they love and why. And then all of a sudden they start hearing about all kinds of things that are kind of concerning to them. So a parent has to kind of look at the bigger picture of who their child is. He's not just a body. He's a body and a soul. And our whole goal, hopefully, is to get him to heaven with us, them someday. And so just as we do sacred duties to worship the Lord, honor him by what we do, and love God, we also have sacred duties with our kids that border on the spiritual and the psychological and the emotional. And I think that we're really good at providing for our kids in the basic area, but a lot of parents weren't talked to by their parents about things that really matter to them. And they don't know where to start. They don't know how to start. They're kind of fearful of what might even come up or might even come out, right? So there's a lot of fear on both sides. And I don't think a lot of parents think about what are my sacred duties? What spiritually and psychologically how can I help my child? So the spiritual duties were actually kind of put into my forefront because, we always prayed with our kids and did religious activities with them at home and felt that that was our responsibility. That just seemed to kind of be part of who we were. But when Dave and I went to the Catechetical Institute, I was struck by a section in the Catholic Catechism about the sacred duties of human beings. And it didn't say necessarily of parents. I mean, I kind of abstracted it from there. So when I was reading it, I thought, I don't think a lot of parents think about this. Like, for instance, the first sacred duty is to be the herald,
Yeah.
to be the herald for your child. And most people reading that might think, what does that even mean,
Yeah.
herald? It should conjure up images of the angels announcing the good news of Jesus Christ, right? They were the herald. They were a herald. That's what a herald does, is announces the good news. The sacred duty then would be they announce the good news of Jesus Christ as our Lord and Savior. So they have to be the ones to say that to their children in that bold language, right? It's not just, oh, Jesus was a little baby and we honor him on Christmas and we bring presents, we buy presents. And I mean, you can do the secular route of Christmas, or you can actually honor it by doing the true meaning, what I call of Christmas. And then when you're a herald, you're announcing all the good news of God, right? And God has so much good news about everything: moral life, the regular daily life, the Ten Commandments, the Beatitudes. I mean, you could go on and on. So that's what that means.
Yeah, that's great. Again, I love the idea that it elevates beyond just the basics, as you said, of just clothing and feeding and giving shelter to our kids.
Yeah. When you think about it, people get excited about talking about deep things. That's what really drives us. It's not like, oh, guess what? I bought a new car today. Oh, great. And Pella or what kind, big deal. That's about a 10-second conversation, unless you're really into cars. Then they might want to know the size of the engine and the type of gasoline or whatever. But for most people, those types of conversations are kind of dead enders. Whereas I think people get really excited when they have conversations with other people that delve into why we were made, who we are, what does God ask of us? Those things that are kind of more philosophical. Would you agree with that?
Well, I totally agree because that really speaks to the heart of who a person is.
Yeah,
A car is very surfacey, it's on the outside versus those values, that understanding of what we're created for, and maybe our unique mission or unique identity. Those are things that really speak to that individual.
right. And yet so many people seem to avoid the things that actually would get them really excited to talk about,
Mm.
or they're afraid to, or something.
And it's an easy criticism, actually, of the young generation that many people will criticize middle school, high school, young adults, that it's difficult for them to have meaningful conversations, that everything is reduced to a text message.
Right.
And so it's good if parents can come in then, and this is part of how we counteract this, right? Is we talk about these deep, meaningful things and invite our children to develop that interior life.
Yeah, you bring up a really good point, because so much of the texting or the social media, they're all just glib one-liners, and it doesn't say anything. It doesn't really tell anybody anything. It's all just safe or sort of maybe.
Surfacey, very
Yeah,
surfacey.
yeah, right. But I had a really interesting conversation with one of our grandsons one day. I had to go pick him up at school. And he got in the car, and I just love him. He's just a typical jock. He loves sports. That's his thing. And he got into the car. And so usually we do some conversation about sports, which I don't go very deep into because I don't know much about it. And anyway, he said to me, he said, Grandma, do you believe in spiritual healing? And I said, what? I mean, that's a really deep question, Max. I'm kind of surprised here. This is great. I love it. But what do you mean? So then he told me about what they were studying or talking about in a religion class. And he just wanted to know if people can really be slayed by the spirit, slayed in the spirit, and what I thought of it. It was a crazy good conversation. And I was so happy that he asked me that question. And so that would be where I'm going with this, is that parents shouldn't be surprised either when that happens, or grandparents for that matter, and just be prepared. So what if it's out of the blue question and you're not really hadn't thought about it? You just take enough time, minutes to think and ponder, and then usually it can turn into a really good conversation. So take opportunities where they come to.
Absolutely. Well, as we look at the sacred duties of parents, I think you outline about 20 of them in the
Yeah.
book. And what I'd like to do is focus on a few of them here.
Okay.
I think the third one is be a bridge between your children and God and your children and society. And so I'd love just to have you expand on that a little bit. I think that would be so valuable for the parents listening to this.
Okay. When I hold little seminars with parents, I usually start out by asking them, is it hard or difficult or easy for your children to be good today? Just be naturally good. So when I say, how many of you think it's easy for your children to be good today? Very few raise their hand. And then I ask them, how about medium? No, not too many. How about hard? Is it hard for kids to be good today? And they almost always raise their hand. And then I ask them, well, how about for you? Is it hard or easy for you to be good today? And most of us agree that it's kind of hard to be good today because of the peer pressures that are out there and because of society pressures and what's considered valuable and not valuable and all that stuff. So the being a bridge between your children and God and being the bridge between society and your children basically is just setting yourself up as that bridge to help them understand, help them cross over to understand why society does what it does and why does God say what he says? Because there's a chasm in between the two. And when I say understand, it doesn't mean we accept some things, right? Because we stand and have our own beliefs. But if we can begin to understand why those people are doing and saying what they're saying, and God still loves them, but, there's the but that doesn't mean that they're marching across that bridge to God. And we're trying to get them across the bridge to God and our kids across the bridge to God. And so then we're standing, let's pretend that I'm standing in the middle. Here's my son over there, and here's God over here. And he's in the throes of an addiction of pornography. And I'm in the middle trying to bring him back to God. And God is trying to teach me how to say it through prayer. And when I study the church fathers and the saints and stuff like that, what's he saying to me so that I can do a better job of bringing my son over here? That's what I mean by that.
Yeah, so important because I love that the church recognizes that parents are the first teachers. And I always tell parents at the beginning of the workshops I do, there's a wisdom from the church there that our world doesn't often share these days.
Oh.
And it's so good that they do that.
Yeah, the term that they use is we are the primary educators of our children. And that's such a important statement in a catechism because most parents kind of think their primary job is to feed, clothe, and educate their children by sending them away to get educated, right? And it's not. They're primary educators, an example of word and deed every day, every way. So,
Exactly. Well, and I could still, on a day-to-day basis, how often in my relationship with my wife and my daughters, how often I default to patterns I learned in my childhood in my family of origin, right?
yeah.
And so there's so much that we do with our kids when they're young and growing up that will impact them for the rest of their life.
Or don't do things that we don't do or say.
Exactly. And that's a long list too.
Yeah.
Things that I've had to learn to grow and to become a better husband and father.
And that's the beauty of God's mercy is he's there. He's there for us no matter
Absolutely.
what. And we just have to be the ones to realize that he's there and we're the ones that are absent and that can learn and move on. And even mistakes. We all make mistakes as parents. We're going to make mistakes as people, right? And in some cases, those mistakes are serious sin and some are lesser sin. But you can call a mistake whatever, but we can learn from those. And just because maybe we did something or didn't quite attend to this duty with our kid as well as we should have 2 years ago. That doesn't mean we can't hop to it right now, right?
Very much so. We're learning that with our daughters are 22 and 23, and the growth that the areas of change that my wife and I continue to work on over the last handful of years continues to improve our relationship with them and continues to give them an example of a better way to show up and to live. So absolutely.
To learn that as well as my children mature too. They're changing and we're changing. And sometimes I'm not showing up so hot and I got to relearn now that they're married and have their own children. And I can't be necessarily as involved as I would like to be for certain things. So, yeah, we
Well,
all,
and don't you think that there's a certain parenting is part of the ongoing, I don't know, not purification, but it's the way that God continues to sanctify us, that we continue to learn ways that we fall short, that He invites us to live more in line with how He calls us to be. And then we continue to have choices and we continue to have access to His grace to move forward. And it's such a great, I was just thinking of that the other day, that sometimes as parents, we can emphasize the ways we fall short. And I think sometimes if we can step back and recognize that, you know what, God will use this to continue to refine us, then maybe we can give ourselves a little bit of grace too and be patient with ourselves.
yeah. I think Pope Francis had a really neat quote that came out not that long ago. He said, we have to remember that God never tires of forgiving us. We're the ones who will get tired of asking for forgiveness. And that includes from God or from our spouses or from our kids or our grandchildren, everybody. So,
Yeah, absolutely. Let's move on to another one of the sacred duties of parents. And I like this one as well. Teach your children to subordinate their material and instinctual desires to the interior and spiritual ones. And within that section, you talk a little bit about what you call decoys and landmines that I think are just so good. So let's look at that. Subordinating material and instinctual desires to the interior and spiritual ones.
yeah, that's a really important one actually because we are in such a materialistic world. And the interior and the spiritual life, it's not as instinctual in the sense that we're fallen creatures. So our instinct is to sin instead of to necessarily search for how I can improve my life in a spiritual and interior sense. But again, back to the conversations, that's what people are hungry for. I mean, our material feeds are the quick and easy happiness, right? There's those 4 levels of happiness that Father Spitzer always talked about. You got the first level is you need food and clothing. Sure you do. And housing. But do we need 55 pairs of shoes? And do we need the most expensive Levi's or the most expensive this and a fur coat and I'm speaking stupid, like for my age, because no young adult wants a fur coat, but they do want the fanciest electronics. They want the gaming systems. They want to be on Facebook. They want to be on Instagram. They want to be on TikTok. They want to be on everything where it's all instantaneous, quick. You get notoriety overnight. You can be an influencer just by doing the dumbest things possible. And none of those are very deep. For the most part, our kids are being attracted to all this quick and easy stuff. And that's satisfying their material instinct to just do more, eat more, see more, the kind of instinct of just existing and having friends and being popular. And those are kind of our natural fallen instincts. So to get to the interior and spiritual ones takes time. That's not going to be a flash on a screen. That's going to be prayer time. That's going to be reading great books. That's going to be listening to speakers that, again, it's not a flash in the pan, 1 minute. And so we have to teach them how to flip that set from wanting what's the easy and the things that satisfy our material self. or they seem to temporarily satisfy or drinking alcohol, drugs, whatever, pornography, back to pornography, seeing and doing things that are just not helping us think about excellence, the pursuit of excellence. And the pursuit of excellence really does require, when you think of like an Olympic athlete, they spend hours and hours and hours training, right? I can't claim to be a gymnast. I mean, I took gymnastics class in college and almost broke my leg jumping over a vault. So, oh, big deal. I learned to jump over the vault and I did that's not excellence. That's not a pursuit of excellence. Nobody would ever want me on their team. And same with, so we go to mass on Sunday. Is that enough? Is that enough to really teach us how to learn to pray to God and to give thanks to Him and give all of our whatever we do over to God? It's totally different, right? So those are the things where that would come in, and asking our kids to be better, do better in the realm of spirituality and their faith and philosophy, and thinking about things instead of just spitting out the first thing that comes to their mind.
Yeah, excellent. You reference in the book decoys and landmines. Is that something in addition to what you were just talking about?
So, like when I refer to pornography and alcohol, or, so decoys and landmines are all those things that try to trip you up,
Got it.
that our society has to offer right now that hurts us, that doesn't help us at all. It doesn't help us in the interior and the intellectual realms at all. And so decoys and landmines range from, well, it can be eating. Say if somebody has an eating disorder. It can be anything from materialism, whether it involves money. I want to buy this or buy that, or it could be a gaming system. It can definitely be pornography. It can be all of those things. And it varies from person to person. Young boys are particularly at risk today for not only pornography, but they gain the pornography through their love for this gaming stuff. And then there's what I call a bloodthirst. When you think back to the Roman era, they loved to go to the Colosseum and watch someone get killed, right? That's called a bloodthirst. That became an addiction to the Romans on top of their other million addictions. And I think we're developing that and letting our kids develop that same sort of bloodthirst that they're not wary of.
Yeah. So we are talking here about developing the interior and spiritual desires. With that, you mentioned also point number 6 and point number 7 shift towards developing the virtues in our children, both natural virtues as well as theological virtues. Explain how you explain that to parents and the value of that to help build happy, healthy, holy children.
Okay, so what I have, it's called a virtue card for young children. And I tried it out at my CCD class a couple of years back, and we had like 6 kids in the class. And I told the parents I was going to be assigning a virtue of the week to their children, and I wanted the kids to take it home and then practice putting on that particular virtue. And then on the flip side was where they screwed up, where they screwed up on that virtue. And most of the kids and the parents were fairly disinterested in helping each other build that out. I was disappointed about that. But there's always one bright star, and he had a disability. And that little guy would come back every week with where he screwed up on that particular virtue of the week and where he excelled in that particular virtue of the week. And he did that for the whole year. We did that the whole year with him. And I think he taught the other kids a lot, never quite got them on. This is second graders, so young. But that's what I have asked our kids to do with their kids. I unfortunately didn't have the wisdom to have this figured out years ago with our own kids. I mean, we talked about, well, that's right or that's wrong, and this isn't good, and that is good, and blah, blah, blah. But that's a lot different than virtue training. And I think kids kind of have a natural sense that they can do this because, and you would just use the instance of soccer, right? The game of soccer. I have a section in my book. Would you stand with your kid and you tell them, okay, let's talk about virtue, and they're going to zone out, maybe perhaps thinking, I don't know what they're going to talk about. So then you just use the soccer instance. Why are there rules in the soccer game? And you have them answer it. Okay, so why do you practice for soccer? And you have them answer it. Why are there referees for soccer? Why do you keep score during the soccer game? It's a whole list of questions. And then you translate that into, okay, so that is the pursuit of excellence because you don't want to go out there. The coach doesn't want to have a person on the team who doesn't care if they're going to be getting better and better and better. God does care, and I care as a parent that I want you to improve in this particular virtue of obedience or of kindness or of gratitude. I think gratitude is a kind of a bugaboo with me. I think that we're not really instilling true gratitude in young children. And so we go through the list, and I think it really is because people, again, they think, well, I did that good today. But is it something that you're doing every day then? Are you learning to put it on more and more and more? So you don't really have to keep thinking about, am I grateful today? You just become grateful, or you just become obedient, or you become truthful, or you become loving. So the list can go on and on and on. And I think it's a fun exercise to do with kids. And when you see your kids, and they can start at 2 years old, right? And you write it down for a 2-year-old, and you give them the virtue of the week. And each of the kids, I would suggest that you give them a different virtue. So they're all different. They're working on something else, right? And then at the end of the week, get them together. And do you know which virtue Johnny was working on this week? Any idea based on his behavior? How about Amy? See if they get it right. And sometimes it seems obvious. And if you learn it early, how to St. Bernard do it, putting on virtue early is so much easier than trying to put it on when you're got all the bad habits in the world.
Oh, that's great. Good old St. Bernard, great wisdom. And I'm growing in my appreciation of St. Bernard of Clairvaux as the days go on. One of the things that struck me as you were talking there is you posed to parents at the beginning of your workshops and seminars. Is it easy or hard to be a good person? And immediately it got me thinking, well, if we've built up good virtues in our lives, it's much easier,
Right.
right? If I know right from wrong and I've trained my will to do that which is good and right,
Right.
then when I'm posed with a situation that challenges that, much easier for me to just continue to do that
Mhm.
versus if I've lived a life of compromising constantly and I get to a big situation, it probably will be really difficult for me to make the good and virtuous choice. And so I think it really ties into that first question that we started the conversation with.
For sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Abs- Well, Linda, this has been a great conversation. I really appreciate it. I know you said on your website you have a lot of resources there. What are a couple additional ones? And please share your website and how you can help parents out.
Well, I wish I would have named my company something different because when it comes to the website, trying to write this down but it's for www.fortifyingfamiliesoffaith.com. You got to have all the F's right, all the T's right, all the Y's and the G's. Otherwise, it doesn't exist. So it's a handle to write down. If you can find it somewhere and just copy and paste, then each time you can do that. On my website are all of my books. They're available, the Daughters and Sons Forever book and workbook. I've got Black and White. It's a book geared for parents. So all my stuff is for parents. People have asked me, well, are you trying to get these in schools? No, I'm not. I think schools do too much. And I just think that that's really getting parents more and more removed from what they're supposed to be talking about and supposed to be doing because everybody else wants to help them. Everybody else wants to do it for them. And especially in the area of sexuality, that is such a one-on-one topic between parent and child that I'm particularly incensed about. And we have been fighting school-based clinics and sex education in the schools for decades now to no avail. And even in Catholic schools now, they're even addressing these things in Catholic schools without the parents. It's really bothering me.
Yeah. Well, thanks again for the great materials. We're going to have you back for another episode. And so we look forward to that. And in the meantime, for any parents that are listening to this, if you want to learn more about our ministry, Freedom to Love, you can check out our website at freedomtolove.org. And until then, know that we're praying for you. Thank you for listening to the Freedom to Love podcast. If you found this episode helpful, please subscribe and share it with another parent. You can also rate us on iTunes. It helps us to expand the reach of our ministry and help more parents. And until next time, know that we are praying for you and your families, and may God bless you.